Hey guys, this is Warnit. I'm the founder of Pet Excel Marketing, and welcome to another enlightening episode of Pet Band Podcast. Today, I'm absolutely thrilled to have truly remarkable guest with us. Joining me on the call is none other than Colleen, the founder of Two Hertz Pet Loss Center. Colleen's expertise and profound impact on the pet loss profession have earned her esteemed titles such as Best Pet Loss Pioneer and the recognition as the most well-known pet funeral director. Her dedication to continuous learning is evident through certification in pathology and being a certified pet loss professional. So, without further ado, let's welcome Colleen to the Pet Brand Podcast and embark on a conversation that will inspire, educate, and touch the hearts of pet lovers around the world. Thank you so much for hopping on the call, Colleen.
What an honor to be with you. Thank
Great, great,
you.
great, great. So, starting the podcast with more general questions about your journey and how things get started. Please give the audience your introduction and how did you get started in your with your pet loss center and like in this specific industry.
I'm thrilled to share this story. So my story, much like a lot of people who are in the pet industry, started with a pup, and I think we've all got an animal that probably drove us here. And mine happened to be a little pup named Miko. And 20 years ago, she died. And my pets are my children. So I'm one of those loving pet parents who see their pets as a member of the family. Died, and I was in the human funeral industry then, Varnett. And when she died, I was trying to find the places that look like what we do for humans when they die. And I didn't quite find what that looked like. And so I thought, I'm gonna take a stab at creating that. And so I did. I created a pet funeral home that was a very safe place for loving pet parents like you and I when their precious pets die, that they can come and do the same thing they would do for a human loved one. They could have a visitation, they could buy memorialization, they could have a funeral service. But at the heart of all of that was the opportunity to have a dignified and respectful end for a pet who had all the things that a loving pet parent could give them in life and needed and wanted to give not only that pet in death, but also to give themselves permission to grieve, to give themselves permission to mourn, to give themselves permission to do whatever they needed to do to say, I did everything for them. And that was a facility that I created. That was a support services that I created. That was the experiential process that I created that mimicked all of the things that we do for our pets in death, much like we do for our pets in life. And so I started that 20 years ago. And to this day, I love educating on pet loss. I love walking the journey with people whose hearts are broken because of the death of a sweet little pussycat or a loved bunny or a bird or whatever it may be. I want to walk that journey with them, and I want to give them permission to cry their eyes out. I want to give them permission to mourn. I want to give them permission to do a service. I want to give them permission to do what they need to do. So not only walking that journey with loving pet parents, but also being an educator with pet care professionals on how to do that for pet people so that we as loving pet parents can say, I did everything. I did everything for them. That's what we want to know.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was like a first in your country, right? When you started that there was no such thing like that.
The reason it was the first, Barnett, is because it was a full-on pet funeral home. I didn't have a cemetery. I didn't have a crematory. It was a little pet funeral home that allowed for every experiential process that could happen when a precious pet dies. And then, of course, I help with the final arrangements. But my facility that I owned, it was merely a pet funeral home, and we handled all the emotions and all the rituals and all the memorialization and everything that was going to center around that final walk for that precious animal.
Since like when you started, it was a new thing, right? So like, what were some misconception about the pet loss that people had that even on this podcast that you want to dispel? Some misconception because you must have met a lot of pet parents, a lot of grieving pet parents, right? So is there any misconception that you go through that you want to dispel, that you want to talk about?
That's an interesting question that you asked. And if I dig really down deep, I think the misconception, Varnett, is that it may come from the veterinary industry where our pet care professionals say people don't want what you have. People don't want to have a funeral. People
Mm-hmm.
don't want to talk about it. People don't want to do anything more. People don't want to think about it. And I think those are the misconceptions that, you know what, I do agree. People don't want to think about it. The reason they don't want to think about it is because I don't want to think dying. The fact is it's going to happen. And when we can plan, when we can prepare, when we can be prepared for the fear of the unknown, of what will happen when he dies, not only with my emotions, but what will happen with his body. What are my options? What can I do? How can I still be in control of his care, because I was in control of his care during his life? And so I think the misconceptions are that people don't want to know what that is. But what I found, let me tell you what I found. When the fear of the unknown is that, what did happen after he died? What did I not know about that I allowed to happen at the crematory or at the cemetery? And now I feel some guilt about that. And now I have a bigger hole in my heart that says, maybe I should have asked more questions. And here's where the guilt comes up. And here's where the regret comes up, that I didn't take the time to get educated. And now I have questions that I can't get answered. And so the misconceptions are that, yeah, you know what? I don't want to think about it, but I need to think about it, because I want to make sure that everything is handled in death the way that I would have handled him in life. And I want to make sure I unpack all of that so I can look back. I can look back on his final walk to the day of his death, to how he was taken care of afterwards. And I can say, you know what? I know exactly what happened all along the way, and I'm okay with it. I'm at peace. I didn't like it, but I'm at peace with how it was all handled. That's what I want. That's the education I still continue to bring to this day, Barnett, is to make sure that people have answers to their questions, because I don't want them to have the guilt and the regret that says, I didn't know. I didn't know what my options were.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about your services, the services that you provide, in what ways do you provide support and guidance to pet care professionals who are dealing with grieving pet parents? Do you provide services like that too?
I do. I provide a lot of educational tools. I've got hours of webinars that are on my website. I want pet care professionals to be able to go into every room with a loving pet parent who's experiencing the loss of a pet. And I want them to be fully prepared to be healthy as they sit in that room and provide support. You know, we live in a death avoidance society, Marnette, where people say, if I die, people say, if he dies. And at the end of it, it's a win. It's when he dies, how will we handle it? And when we honor death, we honor life. And so for us to say, you know what, you get back home and you just get back to normal, and we'll take care of everything. That's not how it works. I don't go home. I don't go home to an old normal. I go home to a new normal. I go home to a new normal where he's not there. And I want to know what to be prepared for when I walk in that door the first time and he doesn't greet me at the back door. I want to know what to be prepared for tonight, the first time I go to bed and he's not in the bed with me. I want to know how to be prepared for that. I repeat, I don't want it dismissed. I don't want it dismissed, and I want to be given permission to do what I need to do to honor him and to honor me in that journey. And I want to be given permission to cry my eyes out. And I want to not be told, don't tell me I was a good mommy. Don't tell me I did everything. I want you just to sit and just to be with me. That's what I want you to do. And that's a large part of the education that I give pet care professionals, Varnett, is I need you to just to be able to sit and hold space and lean in and say, tell me about him, and let me cry. Let me cry my eyes out. Let me do that. That's what I want. And that's the education I want to give.
Okay, so that's what you provide to these pet care professionals.
It is. Well, educate that. I summed up hours of education in just a few minutes there. So there's a whole lot of things involved with that, because how do I help myself as a grieving pet parent if I'm a pet care professional? How do I make sure that I'm not wearing myself out because every day I deal with death? How do I handle that? I want to make sure that I'm showing up and being a healthy support to a family. How do I help them with children at home? How do I help them with surviving pets at home? How do I help an elderly person who this animal is the only thing that they have in their world, the only thing? How do I help them as a support? And so there's tons of it around that. Not to mention, how do I help a pet care professional go tell their story in the marketplace? How do I help them market an end-of-life service? How do I help how do I help them conduct a pet loss support group? So anything and everything that deals with an end-of-life practice, that's the education that I provide. Not to mention, I'm going to throw this one at you too. An association that I helped start, gosh, almost 12 years ago, is the International Association for Animal Hospice.
I went through your website and saw that.
Yes. And so that one is veterinarians and pet care professionals who their entire life, their entire days are dedicated to end-of-life services, end-of-life experiences for pets. And I love being involved with that and helping pet parent families know about that service, and also our end-of-life professionals to get out and tell their story.
Great, Colleen. And also, you also have a lot of courses on your website, right? I've seen your website.
Yes.
Yes. And like, can you tell me your most popular 3-day course, Pet Loss and Grief, Companionship Education, and its impact on the participant?
The most important impact of that class, is that the question?
Yeah.
Gosh, that is the coolest question. That is the coolest question. I want to tell you why that is such a cool question. And I think this is a lesson for everybody. So the main comment I get from people after they take either my online pet loss and grief companioning class or my in-person, the biggest comment, the most impactful comment I get from people after they take that education is not, here's what I learned to go help others. You know what I would hear, Varnett? I would hear, oh my gosh, do you know what I learned about how to help myself? Because I want you to think about this. When we get on an airplane and the flight attendant is telling us what to do with the oxygen mask, what do they say? Put it on yourself first before you help others around you, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing when we're a companion with those that are in a grief journey. I got to help myself first before I can be any help to anybody around me. And so when we know how to, you don't ever perfect, and we don't ourselves, when we have the loss of a pet, I grieve the same way you do. I absolutely do that. I don't get good at it and not have to do it because I know more about it. That's not how that happens. What I want to do is to say, when my little precious kitty died a few months ago, man, I was a hot mess, but I gave myself permission to do that because I knew that's what I needed to do some healthy mourning. And so when we learn that as a pet care professional, which says, you know what, there's going to be days you need to just curl up on the floor, put your thumb in your mouth, and just bawl your eyes out because you need a good release. Do that. Permission to do that. Don't keep pushing. Don't keep pushing it down. Do what you need to do.
Absolutely. And that's where the education matters, right? Because most people don't do that, and that's why these are traumas in their inside, and that trauma comes out in a very different and in an ugly way sometimes.
Exactly. It's like, here's the example I want to give you, and we all do this at one point. I want you to think about grief as a soda bottle, and I want you to pretend I'm shaking up a soda bottle. Okay. And what we do with grief is we keep pushing it down. We just keep pushing it down, and we push it down with words like this. I just got back to work. I kept myself busy. I didn't think about it. Okay. Those are some signs that says I'm just going to push it down.
Just trying to keep yourself busy with stuff. Yeah.
Busy. Don't think about it. Don't think about it. Okay. Because if I think about it, I'm going to cry. You know what? Think about it, because it's like this shaking up soda bottle. Okay. I'm shaking up this soda bottle, and it's the pressure in that soda bottle that represents grief, right? And something's going to happen where I want you to imagine me just taking that lid off all at once of that shaken up soda bottle. What happens? It explodes, right?
Yeah.
it explodes. Something is going to happen, whether it's the first time we go outside and I don't have him to go on a walk with me, and all of a sudden I just burst out in tears on the sidewalk because it hits me. And a soda bottle. I just took that lid off all at once. Versus when we do our good, healthy morning work, we release that lid a little bit at a time.
Release the pressure
We release
slowly and steadily. Yeah.
a little bit at a time, right? It doesn't mean, I mean, I'm 20 years later on the death of that pup, Varnett, and you know what? I still have grief bursts. I still have moments where I miss that little girl and I just have a cry. Crazy for that. I'm not stuck. I cry because it was real. I cry because I miss her. I cry because I loved her. And so I cry. And I'm good with that. Totally good with that. I don't hide it. I don't apologize for it. And that's the lesson I want people to have is don't apologize for crying. Crying is not a sign of weakness. Crying is a sign of strength. And when we grieve, it's because we loved, period.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Period. Yes.
Because that's
Isn't
the
that
reason,
powerful?
because we care for it. That's the reason why we are feeling such bad, right?
Yes. Yes. And if I didn't love, I wouldn't grieve.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And let me tell you something. I have a lot of people who say, I don't know if I can go through it again. And here's my test that I put my gut through. Am I willing to give up all the memories to forgo some tears? And I'm not. I'm not willing. I want the memories. I want the love. I want another chapter in my life with the name of Albert and Beulah. I want those chapters. I love that. I love the memories. It's like the dance. You know, if we knew how the dance was going to end, maybe we wouldn't dance.
Yeah.
I'm going to dance. I'm going to dance.
Great, Colleen. Talking about the strategies, that you use. So like, what are the strategies for effectively communicating end of life services to pet parents with like sensitivity and, compassion? How do you communicate that with them?
It's communicating compassion and empathy. Okay. And the empathy statements are, man, I've been here and it's hard and it really sucks. I've been here. Okay. And the empathy and compassion is tell me about him. And I'm a big believer in these three words, Varnett. Tell me more. I want to know all about him. I want to know about what he meant in your life. I want to know about the lessons you learned from him. And when you tell me these stories, I'm going to lean in and I'm going to listen and I'm going to tell you again, tell me more. Because we live in this world where I want to share my story, but people are so busy to listen.
Yeah,
they're so busy.
Absolutely.
But as a companion, as a healthy companion, to show up, to pull a seat up, to say, I know you're going to cry and I'm okay with that. And to sit here and to say, I want to hear all about him. I want us to lean in. I want us to be present and I want us to not fix it. I don't need to fix it. Okay. I can't fix it. I can't fix anything. What I can do is I can sit here. I can be with you. And you know what, Varnett? Here's what I love. If you want to ask me the most perfect strategy to walk a grief journey with them, I want you to do what animals do. I want you to love unconditionally. I want you to just be and not open your mouth. Isn't that the best thing about animals? They listen to us, right? They don't have an opinion.
Yeah.
They don't try to fix it. They don't tell us to hurry up. They don't tell us to get over it. They don't mind. They just sit there and look in our eyes and say, I'm listening, mommy. I'm listening. Tell me more. Tell me more. And I'm just going to lay right here with you. And I don't have to fix anything other than to lay on your lap. And that's a lesson for us. If you're ever asking, what do I believe I should say? Here's my answer. Don't say anything. I want you to act like an animal.
Yeah.
Listen patiently. Just be. Love unconditionally. Do that. Pretend you're an animal for a second. Because we can learn so much from them, can't we? So much.
Absolutely. And the unconditional love that they give, right? It just feels like just like my dog, right? Even if I'm out for like 1 hour and when I come back, it's their whole lifetime. They just jump around with so much joy, and it just feels so good that okay, there's someone in in the house waiting for me and just waiting to
Yeah.
play with me, right? Because it's their whole life, 9 years, 10 years, right?
Yeah. Yep, I agree. You know what I call that? I'm working on some stuff right now, and I call it our animal quotient. You know, we've got an IQ and our intelligent quotient. We've got an EQ or emotional quotient. I call this our animal quotient. I think there's a lot we can learn from loving unconditionally to trusting, to loyalty, to just be, to forgiving. I mean, all these things, all these beautiful, amazing qualities that animals just organically have, we
Mm-hmm.
can learn from them. And all of that plays into being a beautiful, healthy support when it comes to grief. You know, just think about your dog when you're done playing and you sit on the couch and you guys just sit there and you may be telling him about a good day or a bad day, but he just sits there with you. He's
Yeah.
just there.
I-
Love it. I love it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Talking about your, in your website, there are some resources for pet loss and grief, right? And there's this resource in your journal, right? So, like, what
Yep.
inspired you to create that, the pet loss journal, and how can it assist a pet parent when they are going through their loss phase?
So I'm going to give you a little education, okay? So I want to define two words for you, Varnet. First one is grief, okay? We keep throwing that word around, but I want to define it for you. Grief is what we feel on the inside. It's that emotion that sits in our belly. It's that emotion that just makes us sick. It's what we feel on the inside. Mourning is what you see me do. Mourning is my grief gone public. So when I cry, that's the
That's
active version of
external, and
grieving.
the other one is internal.
Yes. Exactly. So mourning, she who mourns mends. All right. So we've got to mourn to mend. We've got to mourn to make movement in our grief journey. That's how you make movement. Okay. You mourn, you do things. You get mad, you cry, you look at pictures, you light a candle, you go for a walk with his leash and collar is. That's all mourning work. That's what we need to encourage. That's what I encourage in my pet loss support groups. That's what I encourage when I'm talking with families. You've got to mourn. You have to mourn. So the pet loss journal that you're referencing, Barnett, is a really gentle way of having pet parents do mourning work. So you're going to answer questions like, what did you learn from him? Right? I'll give you one for July. They're all themed around the months. So July here in the United States is the month of freedom, right? July 4th.
4th of
One
July,
of the
yeah.
questions, yes, 4th of July. One of the questions in there, one of the weekly activities, morning activities is, what emotion right now in your loss of your pet, what emotion would you like to be free of and why? Tell me about the emotion and tell me why you want to be free of it. I'm angry right now because I had to put him to sleep and I don't think he was ready. Okay, let's just say that was anger is the emotion. Okay,
Mhm.
how am I going to help you release anger? What can you do to release anger? What can you do to find some peace because you're feeling angry about putting him to sleep and you didn't think he was ready? Let's talk through that. Okay. There's some fun questions in there, some lighter questions, some more casual and informal questions. And here's one of them, Barnett. One of them is if your dog were to have a people job, what do you think he would have done? What would his career have been? If he were going to drive a car, what kind of car do you think he would have driven? If he
Yeah.
were to have a style, what would his dress look like? Some really light questions. And you know what I find interesting about those? People know the answers immediately.
Yeah,
Immediately.
absolutely. The moment that you said that, I was like, my dog will be a policeman, right? My
Yeah,
dog will be a cop. Yeah,
yes, I love it. And you know why? You know all the reasons why. He holds
absolutely.
order. He likes to keep things at peace.
Yeah,
You know all the reasons. Yes.
yeah.
Yes. And
And it's
so
like,
now,
yeah, yeah. Please go on.
yes. Yeah. It just gives a different way to think about it. So I love you immediately knew the answer. I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah. So
every single dog has this even if they're the different breed, right? Every single dog has this personality. And when you're going out, when you're meeting friends, and when you're seeing their dog, you know that okay, this dog is like, this dog can be like a painter or something. Like this thing is creative, right? Every single
Yes.
dog, every single pet has different creative energy. So that
Yes.
I love that question really. The one that you gave.
Yes. Yes, isn't it? And while people have, it's a lighter way to ask a question, it's still doing something. It gives you, because you'll say he would be a policeman, and here's why. Because I saw him do this, and anytime we were in a crowd, he would want things orderly, so then it helps them to think and to remember and to reflect on happenings and situations and times. And in that whole chapter they shared, it helps them reflect on that in a bit lighter way, and there's some heavy questions as well, again, such as, where are you at right now with your emotions? What will you miss the most? Other ways to think about him, a lot of times we say, why was your dog lucky to have you, Varnett? And it gives you can say, well, listen, man, I give him all the treats he wants, and we go on fun rides in the car, and we do this and we do that. But I also put a question in there that says, why would your pet say they were lucky to have you? Tell me about that one. Tell me about that. And so it's different ways to think about it, but all morning work. And it gently through these activities helps you to unpack your emotions and helps you to make movement in your grief journey. The beautiful thing about that journal.
Absolutely. Now, talking about the different phase in the podcast, talking about your consulting and the training that you provide to organizations. How do you approach situation assessment for individuals or organization interested in starting a pet death care company? How do you go about that?
A lot of times first of all, I want to understand what they want to do, because my consulting services aren't about what I want to do. It's about what they want to do. And so it's understanding the mission of what they're wanting to accomplish with the services that they provide, how they believe they can go about that, helping them to round out a really solid, responsible business plan. As I say all the time, we got to plan the work and work the plan. So we can't just wake up in the morning and have hope as our strategy. We've got to have a different strategy, absolutely. And hope is not the strategy. So it's helping them to unpack the realities of first of all, running a business. Second of all, if it's an end of life business, of which I do a lot of consulting, that's not a 9-to-5 job. Death happens after 5 o'clock and before 9 o'clock. And so it's understanding the realities of running that kind of business. It's helping to unpack misconceptions that might appear in the marketplace. And, just being a voice of reality, if you will, Varnett, on what it's actually like to be a business owner. And when you work for somebody else, you can blame somebody else. But when you're the boss, when you're the
absolutely
owner, the buck stops here.
Then you even like in my company, like we have employees, right? If they mess things up, I don't even think about like they did a bad job. I just think about I did a bad job, because that's the only way we can grow, because I have to take the blame on me. I was the one who didn't give them the guidance that was needed.
Yep, I agree with you. And as a sign of a good leader, we're the ones that say, hey, listen, what are we going to do better next time? And how might I help you? Because, and secondly, and as a leader myself, I'm a firm believer that everybody in the operation should act as owners. And I want everybody to act as if they own the business. And there may be times that, they come to me, and I, as a leader, if they're going to come to me with a situation, I also ask they come with a fix. I need a solution. Okay. And it may be sometimes that the solution they believe is not what I believe. But I tell you what, I tell them, let's try your way and see what happens. We'll give it 30 days. And, and I'm always a firm believer in very positive ways of presenting things. So it's for me, this is for me, Varnett. It's more about what did we do well and what will we do different? Not what did we do well and what did we do bad? What will we do different? Because that we tried it. Okay. Maybe it didn't have the results that we wanted. So it wasn't bad. It's just we may want to do something different to get a different result. And so I'm a firm believer in positive affirmation with how we're going to do this. I'm even a firm believer when there's people who aren't cut out for the work at my organization, that I always want to have a positive alumni. It's nothing about how they were a bad person. It's about how they maybe weren't a fit for this operation. And I think there's better fits for them. It's just not here. And so I'm a firm believer in that as a leader. You know, we face too much negative self-talk.
Yeah.
We face too much out in the world that I don't need you to face that in my organization. We're gonna be a family, and you're gonna operate as an owner. And I want you to take ownership, and I want you to be empowered to make decisions for the best of the company. Period. And I have found that people 1000% flourish in that kind of an environment.
Absolutely. They just feel like they also have the responsibility, like they have something that, you know, can actually impact the company, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And you know what? When we bring people into our organizations, I bring as you have a talent, smart. So why would I change that when you get into my organization and all of a sudden believe I'm the only smart one? That's not true. Not true at all. You are all that. Be that. Be an owner of this organization and be an evangelist for this organization. Period.
Great. Talking about the pet loss industry specifically, like what are some emerging trends and you know, development that you are seeing that other businesses should be aware about? Like if somebody wants to start in this industry, so what are some emerging trends that you are seeing?
Well, I'm seeing a lot of people who are starting to know that the pet parent is asking for more things. And I think we need to be fully prepared and not continue to say, you know, first of all, what goes on behind the curtain with pet care, whether it's back in the surgery room or whatever it may be. I need to understand that. You know, how I equate that, Varnett, is if I were to have a young child, I would never go to a doctor's office or to a hospital and just drop the child off at the front desk. I would never do that. So why are we still expecting pet parents to do that with their pets? We see the pets differently. We treat the pets differently. And I want to be fully involved in their care. And at the end of the day, when I'm fully involved in their care and I know what goes on behind the curtain, that creates a lot more value for me. And so the price objection goes away. When you create value for me and the value outweighs the price, I'm good. I'm absolutely good. And I will go seek out the clinics and the pet care professionals that give me the value and allow me to be actively involved in the care of my pet, because that's what I do in life. And I want every part of that. And so for us as pet care professionals, it's to stop thinking that we can continue in the way that we did in the past, because people are seeing pets different now and into the future. It's only continuing to grow. And so we've got to be eyes wide open with that. And we've got to be prepared to open up our businesses and to treat them in the same manner. Full transparency.
Yeah, absolutely. And all these, you know, upcoming pet loss organization, like how can they, you know, market their services to grieving pet parents and expand their niche if they want to, you know, give these services in future?
Be upfront on your website. You know, we always believe that if we're going to talk about death on our website, people are going to believe we kill animals. And that's what we're about. It's not true. That is death. Death is a part of life. Let's be upfront about it. Let's be supportive about it. Let's have stuff on our websites. Let's have stuff in our rooms, in our hospitals. Let's, you know, I have a whole webinar on redoing the comfort room and not doing it as we did yesterday. All right. It needs to be an experiential room. We need to stop pushing death down. We need to stop ignoring that it know that it happens. Get our staff prepared for it. Have somebody within our staff who is a specialist that feels comfortable coming in the room with me and wants to be there with me. Let's be upfront about it. Let's embrace it. Because at the end of the day, Varnett, listen, you could have been an amazing pet care professional all through their life, but if we screw up at the end, that's what I'm going to remember. That's what I'm going to remember right there. I want you to do death well. I want you to do it very well.
Absolutely. And like you said, when we were starting the podcast, like you said, you know, with this profession, there's also like a very, you know, emotional exhaustion because you are dealing with death. right? So how do you balance those emotions that your profession demands, while maintaining your own well-being and self-care, and also dealing with that stuff? Yeah.
So that's why I said find a specialist within your organization. If you were to pose that to me, I can tell you that walking with grieving pet parents all day long fills me up. It's not emotionally exhausting for me because it's something that I'm honored to do. It's something that I find as a privilege to do. And so at the end of the day, I'm not tired
Yeah.
because
Okay.
I love to do that. I don't love that it happened. Don't get me wrong. I don't love that it happened, but I didn't write that rule. Okay. And so if there's going to be somebody from a very healthy aspect that can go sit with that family, I'm your girl. All right. And so whether it's at a vet clinic, whether it's within a home-based organization, you've got somebody, because they always come up to me, Varnett, when I go into a clinic and do some education. I have people come up to me all the time that says, I love being with families when it comes to this part of it, because I'm comfortable with it. I'm very comfortable with it. And when you're comfortable with it, then you're filled up by it. When you're uncomfortable with it, and it's
Then you get
not
exhausted.
something
Yeah.
in your makeup, it's exhausting. It's exhausting. And so that's what I keep. Stop pulling somebody just because they're next up to go in the room. Find the person who is comfortable with it and can sit in there and make space and handle the emotion in the room. I'm good at that. I'm really good at that. And I find it to be an honor and a privilege.
Absolutely. Great. And also, Colleen, you have a book published, right? Specifically for this.
I three.
You have 3 books published, right? Let's talk
Three.
about your book, Pet Parents: A Journey Through Unconditional Love and Grief, right? So, like, what message or lesson do you hope, if somebody's reading that book, what message or lesson do you hope the readers take away from your book?
So what I want them to take away from that book is the stories of families who probably look like everybody who's going to read that book. And at the end of every chapter, it gives you something to think about that says, oh my gosh, I loved to hear about Moet, and I love to hear about the funeral that her mommy, Debbie, did for her. I want to think of that. What all the other stories that are in that particular book, what I want you to think about is if I look like that person, I want you to have permission to do what that person in that chapter did to honor their pet. And that's what the book is. That's the takeaways out of that book. It was a very fresh book for me a few years after starting that pet funeral home. And I was so moved to write it because I just saw the permission that people wanted to do the same things that the stories in those chapters were going to hold. And so those are the takeaways. I don't care who you are in reading that. And I've talked to the toughest of the men to women who have said, I sobbed the whole way through. And so it's probably going to find a tear in there because you're going to be able to relate to a story, and you're going to be able to relate to a relationship with an animal, or you're going to find something in your heart that says, I remember when I was there. And so that's the takeaway out of that book. And I also want it to be educational so that when it does come that time with your veterinarian and others that are involved in the care of your animal, you know what to ask for. Because I want you to not be hesitant in asking for what you need as a grieving pet parent and what you need in their final walk, from a bucket list to things you need to do to get ready for your heart to say goodbye.
And what are the other books that you have published? Like what are they about?
So the other 2 books are Forever Friend, and they are children's books. One is for a dog and one is for a cat. And I should air quote children's, because the beauty of those books, Varnett, and they're co-authored with a dear friend of mine, Dr. Mary Gardner. And the books are centered around things that you can do before the death of that animal as a family. And so while they might look like children's books, and they're actually right there, while they might look like children's books, the power of those books is when we can sit down as a family and we can talk about what we remember. And it's very much, both of those books, Varnett, are very much for the child of today. We write a blog, we do a screensaver, we do a memorial service, we create a YouTube video. We do a whole lot of things that are very much about the child of today, who is very tech oriented. But we also let them tap into their childlike self with some coloring as well. And so just a good, well-rounded way to talk as a family about this special little pet that we have and why we're going to be okay to be sad and to honor them.
Wow, that's amazing. Talking about like if somebody is, listen to this podcast and they want to get started in the pet death care industry. So like what advice would you give to an individual who are considering a career in the pet death industry?
So the advice I would give them is to understand there's a whole lot of facets of it. And, whether it's a veterinarian who may want to focus on end of life care, that's a whole different facet. If it's somebody who's wanting to start a pet funeral home and a pet crematory, that's a whole different facet. If it's somebody who wants to who wants to provide grief support, that's a whole different facet. Somebody who's wanting to create a very unique memorialization product, another facet. So for me, it's the questions I would ask is exactly what do I want to do in this space and how do I want to provide the service? And the question that I always ask as well, because we need to be responsible in our business, we got bills to pay. So how are you going to monetize it?
Yeah.
You got to figure out how to monetize
Absolutely.
it. Yeah. It's the only responsible thing to do. And so it's a lot of questioning with people when they come to me and say, I think I have a mission. I think I want to do something. And then we start to unpack what it might look like and if it can grow some legs,
And can you discuss any specialized training or programs or certification that Two Hearts Pet Loss Center, your center, offers to individual who want to pursue a career in this pet care industry?
Yeah, so the Pet Loss and Grief Companioning certification is one that's really 90% of that certification course. It's a 15-hour course, is really about the grief support and what we can do to help ourselves, to help our families. And there's 10% of business in there. We've got to be good business people if we're going to do this as well. So I don't want to discount the business aspect from marketing and exactly what's going on in our world with pet lovers and pet ownership and things like that. So 10% of that course is about the business aspect too. But 90% of that is how can we provide services? How can we hone our skills into being a really healthy companion for a grieving pet lover and what we can do there.
And that is available on your website, right? Somebody who is listening to this podcast can actually buy it, yeah?
Absolutely. Yep. And there's a lot of free webinars on my website as well.
I've seen.
So good free stuff. Yeah. Everybody needs to go take advantage of that. It's good stuff.
Absolutely. And the last question of the podcast, Colleen, what does the future of the industry, pet industry looks like to you, and also the future of like pet death care industry looks like to you as a pet care professional?
I think the future of the industry, I want it to continue to be one that is very open and very transparent. And, again, we live in this death avoidance society where people don't necessarily wake up on a beautiful morning and say, I'm going to go get educated on death today. But it is the one win that we're going to go through as a loving pet parent. Everything else that my veterinarian tells me to do, I can do, or I don't have to do. But my pet will die, period. My pet will die. And so the flag that I continue to carry and the flag that I want pet care professionals to carry is to be a beacon of light and to be that beacon of education that helps pet parents. So when they come down to the very end of their final walk with their pet, I want them to say, the end was perfect. The end was perfect. I don't have any regrets. I know I did everything. We created final memories. I know my heart is shattered, but I also know that we did everything and he had a beautiful ending. And that's what I want the goal for every pet care professional to be, is to carry that beacon and to be that beacon, to have a loving pet parent be able to say the end was perfect. I want pet parents to stand tall and to go get the education for what they need in the final walk for their pets, so they too can stand up and say the end was perfect.
Wow, that's amazing. Great. Colleen, thank you so much for hopping on the call with me. And thanks for your time. It was an amazing discussion.